Hi, everyone, and welcome to this edition of the Payoff Pitch. I'm Chris Steele. This week, I'm joined by Doug Green, and we're going to commiserate about the Chicago Cubs and their upcoming season. So, Doug, just looking at this Cubs roster, not a whole lot that makes me too excited. It doesn't feel any different than last year, and it might be worse than last year. What are your kind of takeaways from looking at what they have going into this season?
Well, my primary concern is the rotation. Once you get past the professor and Jake, who are going to be the other three starters, is my primary concern. I guess Alec Mills, he threw a no-hitter last year, so I guess that gives him some cred. But outside of that, are they going to go bullpen days the rest of the way? I don't know. It's scary.
The Professor and Jake would make for a great CBS sitcom of some kind, too. So we've got that working for us, at least.
Yes.
So really, Jake Arrieta's return, you're mentioning that. Is that something to be excited about? It feels like since he's gone off and just kind of languished with the Phillies, that he really hasn't done a whole lot. Is his return to Chicago going to spark something inside of him that makes him better than he was?
I don't think we're going to see 2015 Jake Arrieta. I don't think that's going to happen.
No.
But I think if you're looking for a guy who's going to come in and he's going to eat innings, that he will do for you. I think he's going to be a reliable, dependable starter, but he's not going to be the lights out guy that he was before. I think he's going to be fine, but he's not going to be great. And he'd be fine if he was the third or fourth guy. If we still had Yu Darvish, which I'm sure we'll get into, I would feel much better about him being the third or the fourth guy.
Right. And like you said, it would make sense if this rotation was a little bit deeper. And right now, you're looking at guys who you hope can help you out, but there's not a whole lot to really rely on or know too much about. Zach Davies was the key piece coming back in that trade that sent Yu Darvish to the Padres. Zach Davies was very good last year. Do you think he's somebody who might be found money? People aren't really thinking about him too much. Is that something that can surprise Cubs fans here?
I think so. I think he's very much I think he's somebody who I think if he comes out and he pitches well, Cubs fans will be a little bit more okay with it. I think if he comes out and just gets lit up every time for the first like three starts, that it's going to hit the fan. It's not going to be pretty with me leading that charge. Okay, and I can't evidently. Chris can't hear me, or I can't hear him. One of the two. Chris is just making faces.
I'm pretending like I froze there for a second because I was trying to make sure that I also retweeted us on Facebook, which isn't a thing, and I just made that a thing. I was trying to make sure I put a Facebook post for us as well, and I was trying to make it so I muted us so we wouldn't hear our voices, but that didn't go as planned because Facebook's terrible, and I do not use it anymore because of that fact. So I've abandoned such ideas. And so Trevor Williams is somebody coming over from the Pirates that I think, as we're talking about the rotation, he could be somebody that surprises people. He was very good back in 2019. I think there were injuries and other things that got in his way last year. Do you have any real idea of what the Cubs should expect from him?
Not really. No, I don't think. I don't know what we're going to get out of him this year, to be quite honest. Maybe he'll be okay, but I kind of doubt it. I don't have a ton of faith in the Pirates have been terrible the last couple of years, so I don't think that he's going to be a major addition. He might be fine as a swing man, your spot starter, but I wouldn't count on him as a key piece.
So the biggest signing the Cubs had of this offseason was Jack Peterson. Kind of a bat to replace Kyle Schwarber, who left to go to the Washington Nationals. The Nationals kind of have set up their own little Cubs East resort where they've brought in Schwarber and Lester. But, having a player like Jack Peterson, he's a guy who's going to play great defense and he's going to hit some bombs on you. Other than that, what does he really bring to this team?
Not a damn thing. I hated Jack Peterson in LA. I didn't want any part of him. Now he's in left field. He replaced Schwarber, who was one of my favorites. I'm about to go on a rant here. So he's terrible. I don't like him. I don't want him. I've watched 2 interviews with him on Marquee Network in spring training. He is a terrible interview. He can't string sentences together. They asked him about his shoe collection. He's like, yeah, I like shoes. They asked him about what he liked about playing in LA. He's like, Kobe. He had a Mamba mentality. That's it. Like, he's terrible. Like, yeah, he's hit a couple of bombs this spring training, but I would have much rather have kept Schwarber over this Joker. I can't see me cheering for him at all. He's gonna have to walk off like every single game for me to like him at all.
He likes Kobe Mamba mentality, Doug. That's a great sentence. What's wrong with that?
Oh, plenty, but that's not something we want to get into here. But yeah, I'm not crazy about signing Jack Peterson. I don't. If he's only on a 1-year deal too, so maybe I can just bide my time. But I don't think he'll re-up. I think he's one and done. I think he was just looking for a place that he didn't have to platoon. He even said that in his interview. He's like, yeah, I just didn't want to platoon in LA anymore. So he was just looking for some place that lets him play every day. So he doesn't really have any ties. So I can see him playing out his 1-year deal and just moving on to Toronto or something.
All right. Well, if you're a player, you don't want to platoon every day. Wouldn't it be more beneficial to just be able to get out there and play every day and show what you can really do? Or is this a guy who has flaws enough that it's going to be problematic that he plays every day?
I think he doesn't have enough of a bat to carry it. I think that's why they weren't playing him every day, because he's a switch hitter. So he should be able to just go out there, and if he plays a decent enough left field, he should be able to hold down that left field job in LA. And if they didn't think that he was good enough on that star-packed team, then why would he? I don't know. I just don't. I'm not crazy about the signing at all.
Yeah. Well, on the one hand, something to be excited about is Ian Happ kind of came into his own last year. What are you seeing from Ian Happ? Is that something where he's going to take another step going into this 2021 season?
Yeah, I certainly hope so. He's done something that we haven't seen in a long time, and that is he has solidified that leadoff spot for the first time since maybe Jerome Walton, which is a long time ago. Yeah, it's been a long time. He's playing well. He plays a good center field. I was always a big Almora supporter, but even I finally came around and said, no, Hap's the guy who needs to be playing in center field every day. So I like having him at the top of the lineup, and then when he's not up the top, put Rizzo in as the greatest leadoff hitter of all time in the number one spot on those days.
Anthony loves hitting leadoff, so just ask him.
He loves hitting leadoff. He loves pitching. He loves playing second base.
Right. Well, and you look at what Happ has done over the last few seasons. In 2018, he was just barely above water with weighted runs created plus of 106. 2019, 128 weighted runs created plus, and then last season 132 runs created plus. So it continues to get better every season. That just shows that he's above your average, center fielder, outfielder. You look around, especially the National League, it's kind of a wasteland out there at center field. So if you have somebody who's talented and can be more than just a glove out there, I think you're doing okay.
Yeah. The outfield defense you feel pretty good about. Haps above average. Obviously, Jay Hay and Wright is very, very good. So that's why I was always okay with Schwarber kind of man in left field, because the other two guys were good enough to help counteract any struggles Schwarbs may have.
And in reality, Schwarber was never that bad a fielder. I think he got a bad rap for those early years in Chicago where he had balls bouncing off his head, and that's not a good look whatsoever. But at the same time, he got better. He wasn't somebody who was going to kill you out there in left field. He's not like the Texas Rangers outfield where none of them own a baseball glove. So Schwarber, for all his flaws, was that guy that you could depend on, and it could be an everyday player. As we're talking about defense, the Cubs do have Jason Hayward, but they added another defense first outfield in Jake Marisnick. He comes over from the Houston Astros where it was too crowded for him to stay around. What should we expect out of him? Kind of like a career fourth outfielder.
Yeah, I think career fourth outfielder. I think that's perfectly fine for Marisnick. Spot the other guys, get a couple of bats, pinch hit. That's fine. He's not taking anybody's job away. He might be the designated pinch runner this year. That's going to be his role.
Yeah, and so when he's platooning in, is he platooning in for Hayward, or who's getting time on the bench when you're trying to get Marisnick on the field?
I'd say just rotate. You probably just rotate through all of them. They'll all need a day off at some point, so just bounce them around. He's got enough versatility, I think, to play all three outfields, doesn't he?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Just as we're looking at like additions, subtractions here too, what are your thoughts on the Yu Darvish trade? Not only him going to San Diego, but them also giving up a catcher who seemed like the catcher of the future. And they're not giving up Wilson Contreras because obviously at this point they're not going to move him. But they gave up on somebody that I was really excited about in Victor Caratini.
Yeah. I didn't understand a lot of the moves that they made early in the offseason. Like they let Q walk and he signed for like $2 million. They let the other, what was his name? The guy who was pitching in the fifth spot last year that we got from the A's. That was a reclamation project. Anyway, he went somewhere and he signed dirt cheap there too. And then Lester said publicly that he would have taken like a serious discount to stay in Chicago. So they let a bunch of guys walk that would have been cheap. And for reasons I don't quite understand, and then they gave Darvish away for Zach Davies and a bunch of baseballs, and I don't get any of those moves at all. So I'm hoping that I'm wrong about a lot of this stuff, but 40-something years of Cubs fandom tells me otherwise.
Well, is it Tyler Chatwood? Is that who you were thinking of?
Yeah.
Tyler Chatwood really had a very good season last year. All of a sudden, it seemed like you were waiting to kind of unlock him. And once they had finally unlocked him, it was kind of like, see you later. We're just going to let you go. So that was kind of boggling too.
Yeah. Why work on restoring a car if you're just going to just sell it?
Yeah. Right. Well, and looking around at this team right now, it's hard to even pick. It used to be, it's so hard to pick who's the best player on the Cubs. Now the tone of the team is kind of, who is the best player on the Cubs right now? So just, Doug, who is the best player on the Cubs?
That is an excellent question. I would say you could make a case. If you're going to ask me for my early season MVP pick, I would say I would put my money on Javi. I would say in terms of pure talent, obviously that's going to be Chris Bryant. And then I would say the guy they can afford to lose the least is Rizzo, because he's the guy who keeps that whole infield situation running over there at first. I mean, Willie's not bad either. Obviously, he was an all-star last year and secure behind the plate. I would probably put him, he's probably the fourth best or 1D, if you want to call it that, because I think all those other guys are all some varying levels of kind of the key piece in there. But I would say some combination of Javi, KB, and Rizzo is the three kind of at the top. With probably Javi being the most MVP worthy with the defense and the splashy offense and the timely hitting.
Mm-hmm. Andrew McKay checking in from Points in the Paint. He says Jock is the only positive thing to happen to the Cubs recently, and it's hard not to argue with that because the other offseason signing is, if I can remember who it is, it's Austin Romaine. So as a backup catcher. So not something to get too excited about. And I love Victor Caratini. I didn't understand that move. Like we've kind of gone over. It seemed like he could have been the next piece. Like you're saying, Wilson might be the best player on this team, but if the Cubs are still very serious about moving him and his contract is very viable to move him in the next year or two, if they're not competitive this year, he might be on a different team come the second half.
Yeah, the only counter argument I would make to that is that it's hard to find a catcher of that quality that is that good both offensively and defensively. And generally, traditional thinking is you want to be strong up the middle, and catcher's the hard one to find. So he would be the one I'd be more willing to hang on to than, say, if the role was reversed, Ian Happ, where you can get another center fielder, but it's hard to find that catcher spot.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you're saying strong up the middle. This team's kind of been waiting on Nico Horner to come into his own and take over that spot. Is this just kind of weird season last year interrupting his development, or is he hit a roadblock here where he might have to like go down for some serious time?
I don't think so. They've talked on the marquee broadcasts this spring and the 3-2-3 that I've seen that pretty much he's just got to hit and the job is his. So and he's been hitting well. So as long as he continues to be, and they're not even asking him to come out and crush the baseball. They just need him to be in that 200, 225, 250 range, hit decent, and then, and then play the solid defense at second. That's fine. That's what they're after. And then spell Javi at short on the days that Javi needs off, and then they'll stick Bodie in at second as the super utility guy. Mm-hmm. So the thing is, the Cubs have the flexibility in all those kind of pieces. They were talking to Chris Bryant, I think it was yesterday on the broadcast, and asked him if he's still willing to jump out into left field if they need him to. And he was like, "Oh yeah, totally." He's like, "I know we didn't do it much last year, but that was because of the short season." He was like, "I'm still willing to run out to left field wherever you need me to play, I'll play." So they do have the flexibility in there that they can mix and match guys if they have to.
Mm-hmm. Well, who is Chris Bryant at this point in his career? Because the last 2 years, he has not looked like the player everybody envisioned him to be. Do you just chalk that up to injury, or is this who he is at this point?
So, again, if you believe what he's telling you, he's basically said, look, the last couple of years, I've been pressing a little bit. This year, I'm going to go out and I'm going to play my game, and I'm going to do what I was doing in 2016 and playing really well. He says, as we both can tell you, he had a kid here a few months ago. Fatherhood will change. It puts different things in different perspectives. So he's been, assessing things differently and looking at those different types of things. So maybe he goes out, plays a little bit more aggressive. Maybe he's a little bit more aggressive in his pitch selection and in hitting earlier in the count. All of those things would be good for the Cubs.
Yeah, probably his second kid, right? Because I think he had a first kid a couple years ago, and that's when he went from, not blaming it on his child, obviously, but he went from just that stage of life of baseball to Chris Bryant, baseball player. And he went from MVP to guy who was getting injured and having some trouble pressing, and just there were issues all of a sudden, and it's not related one to the other, but there are a lot of different things that go into making a baseball player, and maybe Chris Bryant needed just that sole focus to be who he was.
Very well could be, yeah.
Well, and looking around at this team, that's something that you have to start to wonder, because they're no longer the kids anymore. They're getting up there. Anthony Rizzo is 31 years old. He's a player who has a bad back. how much do you think that affects him going into these years? Because in previous years, you saw Anthony Rizzo, he was a fringe MVP candidate, and then late in the year, he would start to fade, and that's because of his back. So if his back continues to get worse, do we expect less and less from Bryant every year?
Yeah, probably. Now, whether he doesn't have quite the injury history, he doesn't have quite that. Bad backs are tough because you just have to just kind of maintain them. There's nothing really that you can do outside of that. If you you have a sprained ankle, you just sit some time with that, or a broken wrist, or any of those types of things. It just requires time. The bad backs just are just maintenance things. That's the other thing that I was surprised, like with your point of letting Caratini go. Caratini was also the first base backup, and now I'm not quite sure who on the roster would be there if something would happen to Rizzo, if that back would stiffen up, like it did, was it 2 years ago, where he had a stretch of like 5 days where he couldn't play because that back stiffened up, and Caratini played like all 5 days. I don't know who that person on the roster is that they could just go and grab real quick. I don't know who is in the minor league system that they would call up if it was a longer term injury, that they would go out and grab. All of their first base candidates have all been kind of just peddled off in other deals. So I'm not quite sure who that emergency person would be. Obviously, we've seen Bryant play there a game or two, but he is obviously not the long-term solution you'd want at first base. You want him someplace else.
Yeah, you probably end up throwing Bodie out there, or even the newly acquired Eric Sogard, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of why this team probably did bring in somebody like Eric Sogard, is just kind of a precautionary thing. He can play every spot on the infield. He can also probably end up saving your bacon if Nico Horner isn't ready, and you have to have somebody who can just be a player on the team until Nico Horner takes ownership of that position.
Let me ask you this then. If Nico, for some reason, falls flat on his face here for the next 2 weeks and just can't understand how to swing a baseball bat anymore, would you rather have Sogard out there at second, or would you rather have them play Bodie and then keep Sogard as the super utility guy?
I want Sogard to be a super utility guy, because I think that's all that he really is at this point in his career. The guy that gets my attention, and he has been a prospect for a while, and then his star fell really hard, and I'm going to get his name wrong. I think it's Eldermaro Vargas. He's 29 now, so obviously not any kind of prospect anymore. But he was somebody that was looked at for a while as a player who did have potential. I would rather see him kick the tires on that and see if there's anything there. Sogard, I think we already know what he is. He's a guy who's going to just suck up some service time for you if you need somebody to fill in for a while and be representative infielder.
Yeah, that's probably fair.
Yeah. One guy we're kind of forgetting about in the mix here is the move with Victor Caratini. Might be more of a signal as well that Miguel Amaya might be closer than we think. It seemed like the timeline on him was going to be more towards 2023. People are projecting him to be up maybe at the end of this year, the start of next year. His stock has risen not quite as fast as Victor Contreras did, but not Victor, but Wilson Contreras. But just what can we expect out of somebody like that? It's so hard to project with catchers.
Yeah, like you said, it's hard to project them. And plus the COVID situation, they're pushing back AAA play by a couple of months. I know when Tara was on last week, she had talked about what do you do with pods and those types of things as well. And so that makes all this kind of tough. This last year and this year, it's kind of a little nebulous that you really kind of almost have to play it by ear and see how they are, and see what kind of baseball shape they're in. And you don't want to leave a guy sitting for 2 years without playing if you think he's somebody he's part of your future. So my guess is probably they'll get him some bats somewhere like you said, maybe he's a September call-up. Maybe if everything kind of returns to normal and we've got full stadiums by, August, and then September call-ups happen, maybe he's coming up for those. Maybe, like we said, maybe if something happens to Rizzo, maybe they do something crazy like let's put Willie at first, take some pressure off of his knees. His bat's more important, and they call him up as the long-term, as kind of that long-term Band-Aid, kind of switching around a couple of spots.
Right. Well, and this is a good opportunity to thank our sponsor for tonight, Yard Barbers. Hate spending those long summer days doing yard work. We have just the solution, Yard Barbers LLC. Yard Barbers LLC is a local full-service lawn care company looking to provide the Quad Cities with quality and affordable outdoor services. Don't wait and fall to the back of the line. Contact Yard Barbers now. It's free yard evaluation and estimates right now. And so find Yard Barbers at Facebook at Yard Barbers LLC, or send them an email at yardbarbersqc@gmail.com. And just kind of getting back into it, this team has been very flexible over the course of its generation, where they started with the guys, Bryant, Contreras, Schwarber. Now we're running out of guys, and we're getting the reunion tour of sorts, getting Jake Arrieta back, and just kind of giving us all the feels here. Strop is back, maybe, if he makes the team. And so
if he keeps himself out of COVID trouble.
Yeah. So is that what this team is really about? If you're a new manager like David Ross, and last year probably wasn't the best representation of what you can be as a manager, how do you make the most out of this team now that they are aging and starting to become who they are, instead of having that ceiling continue to rise?
I think it's like a little bit of what we talked about earlier. It's going to come down to Rossi to make sure that he's managing these guys' playing time. He's going to have to get them days off. He's going to have to be monitoring at bats and knowing, when's the right time to sit somebody. Again, Rizzo's a prime example. He wants to play all 162 games, but as we alluded to, if you do that, his back's going to eventually cause him to wear down at the end of the season when you really need him the most. So you have to spot him in, a couple of days here in June, a couple of days here in July, just to make sure that he's get that rest so that he's ready to go in September and October when you really want him to be fresh and being able to hit. So that's really kind of Ross's big job. Not so much the in-game situations, but the player management and the playing time management. Minutes management, if this was an NBA team, making sure that those guys are getting, the time off that they need and keeping your bench fresh. That's really going to be his big job. Especially with this kind of more of a veteran crew that we've got. They're not young kids anymore. They've been around the block. They've seen what you're going to see. Now it's just a matter of making sure that you've got the right guy in the right situation and making sure that you're not pushing somebody too hard when you can just sit him for a day and get, a replacement level player out on the field, hopefully to band-aid you through for a day or two.
I think they kind of miss that youthful enthusiasm. They know they still have Nico there, but with the rest of them now, they're all grown up. Do you think they need that spark a little bit? Because you look around at some of these other MLB teams, and it's a good mixture of getting their young guys up and having their veterans who have earned it stay on the field. With this Cubs team, it's just all veterans and Nico, and that's it.
Yeah, I think a little bit too. We're so used to having Javi be the spark of the team. He's the fun guy, bat flipping and tagging people and doing crazy slides and all that stuff. And without the fans in the stands last year, he said himself that was something that he really missed, because he feeds off the energy. So with Chicago announcing this week that there will be fans in both the White Sox and in Wrigley, that will hopefully help Javi and some of those other guys get a little bit of that extra juice. They've been talking about it, like I said, on the 2-3 marquee broadcast that I've seen this spring. They've been asking the guys, what's it like to have the crowds back? And they're like, we love it. They're like, even the more not crazy crowds, we're still feeding off their energy. And people are excited to be back in the ballpark. We're excited to see them. We're excited to hear the cheers. And that's just making them feel better and play better, or at least in their minds, they're playing better. So maybe just having that back will be enough of a boost for them, especially for players like Javi that kind of feed off of that crowd energy.
Well, and like you're saying, with Javi, how do you kind of measure last year? Because you go to 2018, Javi has a weighted runs created plus of 131. Then in 2019, he's 114. Last year, he was 57. So weighted runs created plus, if you're average, you're 100. If you're above 100, you're doing better than average. Javi doing much worse than average right now. Yeah. So what do you just chalk it up to weird year, no energy? How do you measure last year for Javi?
I think there was two pieces, and he's talked about them both. One is, the lack of the crowd took away some of the energy that we're used to seeing him play with. And then he's talked a lot about how last season, I guess, was the first year they took away the ability to see in-game pitches, to see the game film in-game. So before the Houston Astros thing, you could go down into the batting cage, see your last at bat, see how they pitched you, see that film, and see how they did that. And he said he relied on that a lot to make in-game adjustments. And then last season they took that away, and he really felt that hampered him, that he wasn't allowed to see how they were pitching him during the game to make those adjustments that he's always used to making. So he felt, I don't want to say the words flying blind, but he did feel like he wasn't getting all the information he's used to having. And so he did feel that affected him a little bit. So maybe you make some type of an adjustment there. I don't know if that's came back this year. I don't think so, just based on the kind of the conversation that's been around there. But if he can get one, the energy back, and then two, some type of more kind of in-game feedback, I think that will help him. Well,
Craig Kimbrell is still a Cub, and there's no reason for it, but he's still here. What do you expect out of a guy who does have the pedigree, the name recognition, but isn't that anymore?
As Bill Parcells used to say, there comes a point where a guy has more name than game, and I think that's where we are with Kimbrell. I don't think he's closer material anymore. Seems like every time they trot him out there, something bad happens. I would like to see him. He doesn't have to be that dominant, shut you down anymore guy, but he's got to be at least serviceable. You can't put him out there and have him be giving up runs every single time. He's got to be able to get people out. And unfortunately, that bullpen, while I was the thing I opened with was the rotation, the bullpen isn't really great either. It wasn't great last year, and I feel like it's not as good this year. I don't think they didn't re-sign Jeffries.
No,
I'm not quite sure where he is.
He got cut. He got signed by somebody and then cut.
Okay, so he was our best closer last year, and he's not on the team anymore. They brought back Strope. It's bullpen by committee at best, and last year wasn't great. So you're hoping to make lightning in a bottle somewhere, but I don't know where that's going to be. Hopefully somebody straightens something out. They fired the pitching coach, right? No, they didn't fire him. They fired somebody. I can't remember. No, they didn't fire the pitching coach. They fired the pitching coach the year before. This is okay. Yeah, they fired him in 2019, 2020. They had a new guy. I think he's still here this year, but somebody needs to fix that bullpen. And unless they're willing to spend the money on it, which clearly they're not, I don't know what the solution is going to be unless all of the people down in AAA or AA all of a sudden decide to start striking out the world.
Well, and Rowan Wick, I thought was a guy who could come along and save this team and be that back of the rotation guy. Strained his oblique last year, so he's going to be slow coming back, projected to probably miss the start of the season. maybe miss even a month of the first season. Do you think that's something that has some legs to it? Do you think he can be the guy that they rely on once Kimbrell, becomes Kimbrell again and they're looking for other options?
Maybe. You had asked me at the start of last year if I thought Jeffries would be the guy, and I probably would have told you no. So they seem to be taking the approach of we'll find somebody. Somebody's got to do it. I don't know who that person is on the roster in the bullpen. Maybe they'll find somebody. Maybe they'll. But at this point, if the Cubs aren't leading by multiple runs heading into the 7th, 8th, 9th, I don't have a good feeling about what goes on in tight ball games.
Yeah, Jeremy Jeffress was part of that contingent that all went to the Washington Nationals, but I think the Nationals have already cut ties with him, so he's floating around, and maybe the Cubs will end up reuniting with him at some point. One other guy that maybe a bullpen option, but maybe more of a rotation option if somebody blows a flat tire among this starting 5 that they've put together that doesn't really excite anyone, is Adbert Alzolay. He was somebody who looked like in, I want to say 2018, really showed that he could be a potential major league starter, taking a backseat last year, but now he's got another shot to potentially make this starting 5 at some point because they're not really exciting anybody, like I said. So where does Adbert Alzolay kind of fit into this whole puzzle right now?
I kind of hope he wins the 5th job or the 4th job. When he pitched last year, when Q was out, he pitched really well, I thought. So he's a guy that I would be comfortable with if they had him as one of the rotation options. Just because he's probably the best pitching prospect in the organization. And, there's not going to be – Randy Johnson's not walking through that door. You're going to have to throw somebody out there, and that kid's got just as good of a shot as anybody else. I'm willing to roll the dice on him much more than the guy we got from Pittsburgh.
Yeah. Well, and Trevor Williams actually was good 2 years ago in 2018, I want to say. 2 years ago being the last time there was actual baseball. So there's potential there. It's just kind of an injury history. Doesn't really feel like he fits the bill. Alzolay, like you were saying, did look good last year. He had one of the best strikeout rates in all of baseball, even though it wasn't very many appearances. He was in the 91st percentile for strikeout rates. So that's something that you look at that maybe there's something there. If he can just come in, eat up innings and get strikeouts, that's going to be good enough to help you win.
Yeah. That's kind of the hope, is that you're going to run the professor out there opening day. He's going to be your ace. You've got Jake, who's going to eat your innings and then mix and match with everybody else. If Alzolay ends up being the 3rd guy and being kind of the strikeout guy, that's good. And then maybe the last 2 spots aren't nearly as terrible with Mills and then Davies, whatever his name is.
Davies, yeah.
Yeah, well, maybe those 2 are, that might get you by.
It doesn't matter at this point. If he can get outs, he can get outs. And he was pretty good last year, too. So maybe Zach Davies will surprise people. Just real quick, For Fantasy's Sake is happy to announce our exclusive deal with Monkey Knife Fights. Monkey Knife Fight is a daily fantasy sports gaming website for casual sports fan that is simple, fun, and easy to play. Users determine which superstars compete in the daily professional sporting events, which will record more or less than the contested line provided. Monkey Knife Fight's daily fantasy prop games play similar to the salary cap-based games of daily fantasy games, but without the algorithms, lineups, and most importantly, the sharks. There are several contests to choose from, none of which require hours of research required on competing sites. Start with a single 2-on-2 or go for the highest payouts. 100 times and higher by selecting an 8x8 more or less contests. See, I'm a fantasy noob when it comes to daily fantasy, so I don't even know what that means. So this would be perfect for me. Get started now with 100% instant match bonus of up to $50 with promo code FFSQC. And Doug, I'm just kind of looking over the roster a little bit here again. And the starting pitching, one guy that we've mentioned a lot, but I don't think we ever give the due credit that he deserves, is Kyle Hendricks, because there was a stat just floating around Twitter the other day. It was showing pitchers over the last, I think it was 5 to 10 years, who have gotten the lead in strikeouts, and Kyle Hendricks was up there. And you don't think of Kyle Hendricks as the strikeout guy. You think of him as the wily guy who's going to outpitch somebody. But he's managed to get people out by strikeout as well. Is this guy just not getting his due credit because he's been so consistent and so good?
Yeah. He's dare I use the term, he's very Maddox-like. Like, you think of the strikeout guys as the guys who will blow you away, but Hendricks is crafty. He'll get you out because you're looking curveball and he throws fastball, or you're looking fastball and he throws curveball. So he's always mixing it up. I think this will be the season that we'll really kind of see exactly how great of a pitcher Kyle Hendricks is, because now there's nobody else. There's no John Lester. There's no Yu Darvish. There's no Jose Quintana. If you have a bad outing, there's another guy there to pick you up. He has to be the stopper. So if there's a losing streak and it's his turn to pitch, he has to be the one to go out there and get a win. So we'll see kind of what that does. Now, he's so even keeled. Everybody jokes about how even keeled and how you can't, rattle him. We'll see. We're going to put that to the test this year of how good he is as the number one guy.
And I think another one that is getting kind of overlooked, we mentioned him just barely, but it's Alec Mills, and he was very, very good last year too. Do you think there's anything more to him than just a guy who can come in and be pretty good? Is he potentially going to rise to that level of Hendricks-like ability?
I mean, Hendricks doesn't have a no-hitter on his resume. So, right. I mean, you don't do that by luck. You have to be kind of good to throw a no-hitter. So let's hope so. Let's see. I'm looking at his statistics here for last year.
I don't know about the whole you have to be good to throw a no-hitter thing, Doug, because there are pitchers out there who have thrown perfect games and they are straight garbage.
Yeah, I suppose you're right. There are some that aren't great. Trying to find his – that can't be right. They're showing him with a 1-0 record for last year, and I'm like, I know that's not right. I know he pitched more games than that. So I don't know what the statistic – maybe this is spring training statistics. I don't know.
Must be. Well, it looks like last year he was –
there we go, regular season.
Yeah, 5-5. So –
yeah, that's better. Yeah, 5-5 with a 4.48 ERA in 62 innings. Over how many games started? 11 games. So, I mean, yeah, good, not great. That's, another innings eater guy. As long as he's getting people out, not getting lit up. That's the big thing, is you can't be getting lit up. You can't be giving up 3-run homers, because that's the thing that everybody kind of talked about. Was a couple of years ago, it was the Cubs offense that, everybody was really kind of keyed in on. That was the murderer's row of lineups. There wasn't an easy out, until you got down to the pitcher spot. And then the last couple of years, they just can't generate offense. If they're not hitting a bomb, it's just I don't know, they can't score a run. They can't just get a single and a double and knock in a guy. It's they'll get the single and the double and they'll stop a third, and then the next two guys strike out, and then there's a pop up. So they just can't get people in when they need to. And the other thing that kind of strikes me as strange, and I don't know, and this is pure anecdotally, I don't have the statistics on it, but it feels like the Cubs will hit into 2 or 3 double plays a game, but only turn like 1 double play a game. And it feels like they're not, that isn't balanced out. They're giving away too many opportunities and not generating enough of those on the defensive side, even as good as defensively as they are. So I think if they could get that number closer to 50-50 and then just, when runners in scoring position, if that number is anywhere close to the league average, that'll do wonders for the offense.
And I think that was the thing about 2016 is there was more of a mentality of they're going to win this game. Whereas transitioning into 2017, the mentality became more of they need to find a way to get somebody to just get across the plate. And with runners in scoring position, you never trusted them to like any degree. It just felt different. It seemed like every time. And now it seems like the Cubs keep making the playoffs. But when they get there, you're like thinking this team can't score runs. Even though you look around at different players and you're like, he can be an all-star. He can be a potential MVP. These guys can't score runs when they need to.
No, if they get down 3-0,
it doesn't make sense.
It's over.
Yeah.
If they're getting 3-0 in the second, it's done. Like they can't generate enough offense, or they can't hold the other team down enough via the pitching staff. Mm-hmm. If they do manage to put 4 on the board, the bullpen will come in and give up another 3. It's just they just never quite seem to be able to play catch up. If they're playing from ahead and they put up a 4 spot in third, yeah, they're going to spend the rest of the day. But if you're going to ask them to come from behind from a couple of runs, the last couple of years has been totally just swimming upstream.
Yeah. And I want to change my tone on Alec Mills too, because while he wasn't awful last year and he did have the no-hitter, if you look at his percentile rankings, he is just dreadful. Like his whiff rate is in 4% of the league. It looks like his K rate was in the 17th percentile of the league. So just a bottom dweller on all these statistics where you want to see somebody doing good. His walk rate was real high at 63 percentile in the league. So not a guy that I would endorse going after for fantasy. So even though it looks like some of the numbers skewed towards him having a good season, the peripheral numbers say stay away from Alec Mills.
Yeah. He's got a 46-19 strikeout to walk ratio. That's not great in 62 innings. So yeah, that's not great there. And gave up 13 homers. So those aren't great numbers.
So we're talking about the Cubs rotation a lot and how it kind of falls short. Last week, Tara and I were talking about the Cardinals, and the Cardinals have everything going right for them, it seems like. And they're just going to come out and dominate the division. What do you see from this division? How do the Cubs fit into it at this point?
To me, they're middle of the pack. As much as I hate to say it, St. Louis looks good. I hope DJ's not watching because that roster looks really, really good. Milwaukee's always tough. They're probably the next best team, I would think. They've been kind of hanging around the last couple of years. They've been looking really good. I would say probably the Cubs are kind of next, just based upon pure talent on paper, and then Pittsburgh and Cincinnati aren't great. Basically, for the Cubs, if the big games are going to have to basically beat up on Pittsburgh and Cincinnati, and then they're going to have to do more than their share against St. Louis and Milwaukee if they want to make any kind of noise.
Well, and I think the real thing is Cincinnati has gotten so much better over the last few years. Last year, they were very good. This year, they look keyed up to be even better. So I'm worried about where the Cubs fit into this whole thing, because I keep looking at Cincinnati and thinking this team is actually a lot better than people give them credit for. I know they lost Trevor Bauer, but this team makes a ton of sense. And it's like you were saying about that 2016 Cubs team. There's no easy outs on this team. And even at catcher, where Tucker Barnhart isn't very good, they have Tyler Stevenson, who's a prospect who's ready to like take over that position, and he's on the rise, just waiting for his moment. So it just feels like all the other teams have rocketed past the Cubs, while the Cubs were kind of just continuing to stick to their guys.
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, looking back on the last 4 or 5 years, I mean, what changes would you have made, though? I mean, are you really going to go out and move Chris Bryant? Probably not. You weren't going to go out and move Javi. You weren't going to move Rizzo without them burning down the north side of Chicago. Probably not moving Willie. You had too much money locked up in Leicester. So, I mean, what moves were you really going to make short of, making a deal for, whatever?
Yeah. Well, if you were to try to make a move, it's something that Tara and I talked about last week, is the only hole the Cardinals really have is maybe another spot in the rotation. Jake Odorizzi is floating around out there. Does that make sense for the Cubs as much as it does for the Cardinals?
Yeah, I would say at this point you're looking for some type of you need an arm, whether that be bullpen, whether that be starting rotation, but you need an arm, maybe two, to get you by. Now, what are you going to give up to get that is the problem. Who are you really trading in there? The guy that everybody talks about is Bryant, and moving him for a bunch of pieces, but does that make you better? Probably not. So who are you really moving? The farm system that everybody had talked about for years, they basically sold that to get to 2016. And so now you're kind of left with they didn't reload it. Theo's gone. What are you really going to do to make any type of move? And ownership doesn't want to spend money on free agents. And plus, with it being a 2020 COVID world that everybody's, although nobody wants to spend any money because they're not sure how many fans they're going to have in a stadium in a given year. What's really kind of your option other than stand pat and hope that somebody catches fire?
Yeah.
I mean, really, unless somebody's really some team's really going to have a fire sale and they're willing to give you somebody for, 16 minor leaguers, which nobody's going to do.
Right. Well, you're right. And you start looking around the league and you look at Gleyber Torres, who's tearing it up on the Yankees. And then you look over on the South side and you see what Eloy can be this year if he's going to rise to that superstar status that he's supposedly had. And all of these pieces that were a part of winning that championship in 2016, but also chopping off your legs for the future down the road as well. So definitely take the championship for sure. Mm-hmm. But now is when you pay the piper for those moves that you had back then.
Yeah. And it's fine as long as you were refilling the minor league system here in the last couple of years. But I'm not really as tapped into it as I used to be, but I don't get the sense that there's a ton of stars coming. No. They won too much. A lot of this came from all those crappy years where they were picking at the start of the draft. Javi was a high round pick. Schwarber was a high round pick.
Yeah.
You had all those guys, and you basically said, all right, we're going to bring them all up together. And basically you did that, but you didn't. Then the time came to refill the bucket. You didn't bother to do any of that. Now, I don't know. Like I said, I'm not as tapped into the minor leagues as I used to be. Maybe there are people down there that are waiting to explode, but I don't get that sense just watching the national media or watching Marquee that basically the major league team is as good as it's going to get. There's no help on the way. There's no top 10 prospect the way that we were all hanging around waiting for Bryant to be called up or hanging around or waiting for Javi to be called up. This is it.
Even to a degree, Ian Happ was wait until we see Ian Happ here and things like that. Now, I guess the biggest one is Adbert Alzolay and, even Miguel Amaya. But the biggest prospect they have right now is supposed to be Brennan Davis, and we're not going to see him until 2023. So that's like not even on the radar for people right now. And Ed Howard is another one that is kind of getting some rep, but he isn't a guy that is going to help you in any way this year. So it's hard to, like, I guess you start to pay for those mistakes that you made along the way, and trying to get to the championship. Getting to the championship, those moves all made sense. But the other guys, now it feels, you start to feel it. It's a gut punch.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and as we wrap up things here, we just want to let everybody know that For Fantasy's Sake has gear available now. Doug and I are both repping it tonight. We're the Quad Cities' first and only fantasy football show, and now we offer our own gear as well. If it can look good on guys like Doug and I, just think about how good it will look on a real person like you. So just keep that in mind. You can find it on our Twitter page. You can find links to the gear on our Facebook page as well. You can also check it out at veridianglobal.com, and you can find links there to the gear that we have. Doug and I are both repping the baseball shirts. There's t-shirts on there as well as hats. Mm-hmm. So give it a look. It should be fun. More fun than the Cubs season is going to be. So, Doug, any last thoughts on this Cubs as we do kind of a staring into the open grave, looking down, wondering what life is all about right here?
Yeah, I would say my friends that are White Sox fans, they've really been kind of giving me the business here, because they're like, we're going to be good this year, right? I'm like, yeah, I know you guys are going to be real good. So I know it's a little bit sacrilege to cheer for the South Side, but if you're still interested in good Chicago baseball, maybe check out the White Sox and looking for those types of things, and jump over to the radio side and listen to Len.
Yeah, no, Len's good, and they even lost that. They lost the good thing. Yeah. They lost another good thing, Doug.
Yes. Now, actually, I've been listening to Boog's actually pretty decent.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, well, I wasn't sure when they announced him. I was like, who? And then once I kind of heard him a couple of times, I'm like, oh yeah, I know this guy. He's not bad. He seems to have a good rapport with JD, which was the big thing. Yeah. Len and JD got along so well. They were such a good pair.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And you didn't want to lose that. And their chemistry is not perfect yet. Obviously, they're 3 spring training games into it, but you can tell they're comfortable with each other, and that's good.
Well, and also check out Points in the Paint tomorrow night. They're going to be on at 8:30 doing some basketball analysis as well. I want to root for the White Sox, Doug, but they still have Tony La Russa as their manager. That makes no sense to me, and I want him to have a tall building fall on him of some kind.
Yes, me too as well. I will say that any success of the White Sox will be in spite of, not because of him.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, Sando's checking in.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, and I want the White Sox to be good. I just wonder what that dynamic is going to be like, because all of them are younger players that want to have fun. And there's your crusty old manager who's supposed to be like reining them in. So the first time that, Tim Anderson hits a walk-off home run and he flips his bat out of the stadium, what is Tony La Russa going to say? Is he going to celebrate that, or is he going to go old baseball guy and say that he's a bad dude and broke the baseball codes?
Oh, he's definitely going to say, he's definitely, once he hits home plate and he goes back in the dugout, he's going to be like, yeah, that was great. Don't flip the bat ever again. That conversation is going to happen.
Okay. And then Eloy can just hit him out of the stadium. If he does that, then Eloy's going to be my favorite guy ever.
Yeah. Eloy was a tough one to lose, but yeah, he's fun to watch.
Yeah. All right. Well, just turn your attention to the South Side and hope that things will be better for the Cubs in the future. Hope springs eternal is supposed to be the Cubs saying, until they won that World Series, and then they were supposed to be contenders every year. Now it feels like we're back to hopes. So that's going to wrap it up for our Cubs analysis of this week. So to everybody who watched, thank you so much for watching the Payoff Pitch. We'll be back next week at 9:00.